Happy Wednesday. This is our fourth year doing our Voice of Supply Chain show. I'm not actually sure what number we're on because we've skipped a couple months here and there, but this is a special show, not only because of our guest today, but I have been hosting the show and coordinating with Kathy from ISM since the very, very beginning. And this is going to be my last show hosting Voice of Supply Chain. Catherine McCleary, who is a dear, dear friend of mine, I call her my marketing bestie, is a brilliant, brilliant brand builder and marketing leader in the space, is going to be taking over the show. I have some big personal news that I will be publicly announcing on LinkedIn, but I landed kind of a dream job working for a dream boss. And given everything going on with my new role, I need to step back from some of my other activities so I can focus on being an awesome go-to-market leader and brand builder in my new role. So kind of big news, bittersweet in that I look forward to this every month, and we've had some amazing guests and conversations. Time to pass on the reins to Catherine, so she will be taking over and hosting our show next month. With that, let's dive into our guest today. So Michelle is somebody who I met for the very first time at ISM in Vegas. I knew of her, but had not met her in person before. And one of the most dynamic, interesting, engaging people I have ever met in my career. And after our first, I think it was breakfast, where a big group of us got together when we arrived, I sat across, or maybe it was dinner, and she was across the very long table, and I said, we need to have her on the show. And I messaged Kathy immediately and said, Michelle is going to come on our show. Absolutely must happen. So with that, I'm glad to announce that we're able to corral Michelle with her crazy schedule, time zones, differences, and have her come on today. For those of you that saw some of the posts for the show, I think she probably has submitted the most interesting, personal, random tidbits and fun facts of any guest we've had. So we're definitely going to dive into some of those as well. And if you have any questions for Michelle, please drop those in the comments, and I will do my best to get those through the conversation today. Also, drop us a note and tell us where in the world you are joining us from. Michelle is rocking her Irish outfit today with the Irish hat. So give a shout out to our green friends. So Michelle, yeah. I like to start our shows so the purpose is to have you share your personal journey and story. This is not just about the business show, but this is about people doing incredible things and who have had really interesting lives in our industry. So I like to start going way back in time, all the way to childhood.
That's a long time.
So put your thinking cap on, and let's start with your favorite childhood memory.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. First of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me, and also thank you, Sarah, because these ISM sessions have been really captivating and knowledgeable to, I'm sure, not just myself, but many that are on the call today. So I just want to say thank you for that as well. Although I did want to make one statement that, don't say too much. What happens in Vegas is supposed to stay in Vegas. So we'll leave that where it is, and anybody who met me there as well will have a bit of a laugh. So let me tell you a little bit about, my childhood. So I grew up in a very small town in Ireland, surprise, surprise, with the hat, a family of 5. And when you're in the middle of a family of 5, you are not heard very much, let me tell you. So much so that
one of my... What number were you in line of the 5?
Oh, number 4.
Okay.
So I wasn't the favorite child because that's the youngest, and I wasn't the oldest child because they're the ones that can't do no wrong. So you're somewhere stuck in the middle. So that's a little bit difficult, especially when you're doing farming duties. By the time they got to number 5, my farming duty was definitely to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and go and feed the pigs. I'm not going to say anything else there, but that was my duty. Sounds like
Michelle the pig feeder.
Oh, that's exactly it. The 3 older boys before that got some of the better jobs, like driving the tractors and everything. So that's another story. Favorite childhood memory is quite interesting. I am a fanatic football fan, not that American football fan. I don't know what that sport is. I'll let you all think about that. Definitely soccer. Definitely a fanatic about a football team called Liverpool. And my childhood memory is that they came to Northern Ireland, not even Northern Ireland, to my very small beach town area. And I was very, very lucky. My dad actually took me there. I played with Kevin Keegan. If anybody in this call is from the UK, they'll know that that is just phenomenal. And actually, they gave me all their autographs. And lo and behold, I am now got a seat at the stadium, which is very rare. I met them again later on life when I was in the police in London. I was in the Metropolitan Police. I met that Liverpool team again, showed them this lifetime memory, and they actually gave me a season ticket for life. So that childhood memory is something that has been exploited into my adulthood, and probably my poor children have no choice but to support the same team.
Yeah, they'll be banned from the household.
Exactly.
So does this mean, are you a Ted Lasso fan?
Oh, please, who isn't a Ted Lasso fan? Although in saying that, he's come from an American football background. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I love anything to do with Ted Lasso. He's just got that dry sense of comedy, that you can't help watch it. It's completely not relevant to what football is in the UK, but I don't know anybody in the UK that doesn't love Ted Lasso. I don't know anybody, especially shortbread.
When you said football, the first thing that came to my mind when you said not American football was Ted Lasso, because love, love, love Ted.
So do I. And his shortbread. I don't know if you know, but he makes shortbread on the program, and that shortbread is now for sale. Just in case you didn't know.
There's a whole thing online where people submit recipes and they try to copy and make
exactly.
So it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, love him, love it.
So you mentioned to me when we were prepping for the show that you and your siblings did potato picking.
We did. So coming from a farming area and community, the local primary school or your early schools here in America, everybody got 2 weeks off in October. And I mean, every child that came from a farming background. And we would break our backs to lift potatoes in the fields long before technology was there. If we think about globalization and the digital revolution, I think I was still post-war, Cold War. Everybody was doing it. How many potatoes could you get into a bag? The local farmer, if it was my mum, would come up with these massive sandwiches and we'd all sit down. Brilliant camaraderie, hard work. I'm now 56. I have the worst back problems ever. My husband says it's because of my children, but it's definitely because of my back, because of the potato picking. But great experience. And you know what? Work ethic. I think that's where my work ethic really started from, because you had no choice. That was your, how you grew up. You were forced to go and do some farm work. If you wanted to eat, you were going to do it.
So you mentioned that so outside of school and farm life, right? Not a lot of time for other things. You mentioned that you failed your entrance to grammar school.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Here in the States, I don't think we have the same process. So what is grammar school? Let's start there. And then tell me about failing this exam.
Yeah, so I would say in Northern Ireland, there was still an awful lot of elitism. and even in the educational system. In fact, in any system, it really was not what you know, but who you knew. To actually move forward in, anything to do with church or society or schools or politics. It really was, your background. At primary school, it's like your lower school, your first entrance. To get to a good junior school, you had to sit an entrance exam, and there was definitely an elitism there. You either went to what was called secondary education, or you went to a grammar school education where they were brought down the route of more an academic excellence, whilst at the secondary school, and please don't laugh, audience, as a young girl at the secondary school, some of the things they used to teach me was how to iron a handkerchief, how to change a child's diaper, or nappy as we call it, how to make certain food. So you can imagine, as a very opinionated, highly strung young lady, it wasn't working for me at all. So that I didn't have the best experiences at secondary school because I was academic. I wanted to learn. I wanted out of Northern Ireland at that point. But we tried to influence local people. If you had some money and you could give them money, they certainly would have got you into the grammar school. But my dad certainly wasn't going down that road.
It makes me think of, so one of my favorite all-time shows, well, it's a I think 8 or 10 episodes mini show, is Queen's Gambit.
Yeah,
And
love her.
she goes to a boarding school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And orphanage, and she was not she did not enjoy the ways, and was very vocal and spoke out. So I'm kind of envisioning you a little bit like that,
And
scrambling.
Sarah, I'll be honest with you, even some of those things that she had encountered where she was put into rooms, I remember being, hit with rulers, because back then you were allowed to hit children to discipline them. I can remember being locked in a locker. I'll tell you a funny story, by the way. I got locked into a locker, I think because I didn't get my arithmetic right at that time. But what they forgot was, in this locker was all of the tuck shop biscuits. So it was quite nice. I just sat in there and ate them. Their fault, not mine.
So something else that seems to be kind of a theme in your life, and I'm curious when it started in your childhood, is athletics.
Yeah.
So how did you, outside of school and farm life, how did you stumble upon, wow, I may actually be a really good athlete? Like, how does that come about?
Yeah, and that came about more through church. Church were very good at getting you to go to things like youth clubs. They were trying very hard, to establish, Christian beliefs at a very young age, indoctrination in some cases. But they wanted then to encourage you to go and do sports or activities that the church would manage. So I initially went there to play badminton, if you know what that is. It's a lighter version with shuttlecock, which I absolutely loved. And do you know what? I wanted to be good at it because it got me out of farm duty. And not only did it get me
Picking or pig feeding.
exactly, and not even more than that, but once you start doing well within a church environment in Northern Ireland, then the people in the church really like you. And now you're at that stage where it's like, oh, I like her. She can come to this. And I just wish I'd have started it before the end of primary school. Maybe I would have got into grammar school. The gymnastics were, in a group of 5 children, you needed to do something that was a bit different. You needed to stand out. So each of us had our own sort of key things that we were good at. One was good at football, one was good at fishing. My sister was just good at mowing. I wanted to try and do something, and I seen Olga Corbett, if we remember those days, doing gymnastics, and I'm like, I want to learn how to do that. And luckily, I had a really strong, independent grandmother who literally took me under her wing and said, I'm taking her down this route. But a lot of it, to be honest, Sarah, a bit like Olga Corbett, really was to get out of Northern Ireland. It was another way to channel opportunity for me. And I was always looking for an opportunity to get out of the country.
Who would would you say, you mentioned your grandma before.
Yeah.
Who would you say was the most influential person in your childhood and why?
Um, I would definitely say it was a math teacher. Again, growing up and going to a secondary school education, they really, at that stage, really felt that you were going to marry a farmer or you were going to work in a factory because you're not doing that academic strength of education. Very very discriminating, at that early age. I had a math teacher who realized quite quickly that, I wanted to absorb as much information as possible. I love education. I know we'll talk about that later. I love to learn. And she just recognized that. She recognized also that I could see that there was different paths that I could take, and especially one that could, at that point, take me out of this country that was, very bitter and fighting amongst themselves, amongst friends, etc. And she, like my grandmother, took me under her wing, gave me the same mathematics that the grammar school were doing, and put me into those exams outside of the secondary educational system to ensure that I passed them. She was just phenomenal. I think we all have that one teacher that's influential. But she basically said to me, you can do anything that you want. You just have to have the mindset to do it.
What was her name? Let's pay tribute to her on the show.
Miss Patterson. I've just seen my son's on the call. That's terrible. But yeah, it was Miss Patterson, and she knows. I actually looked up on LinkedIn a few weeks ago to find her, and she was still alive now. And I'm old, and I actually told her just how influential that she was to me. So,
well, we'll make sure we tag her or share this recording with her. We've got a ton of people in the audience putting notes where they're joining us from all over the world, which is really fun. We've got Leo from New Jersey. We've got John from Ottawa, Canada. We've got Fatima from Chicago, someone from New York, Cheryl from Atlanta. April has a quick question around this sport. She said, what Irish athletes should be on the lookout for in the Olympics? Any favorite?
That's a great question. I can see my son is on the call, which is Kai Armstrong, everybody. So shout out to him. He's in Dubai at the moment. Both my children swam for Ireland, just so you know. My daughter went to the Junior Olympics. My son was a phenomenal swimmer, but the most laid back child anybody could ever come across. His best friends from swimming are all swimming at the Olympics this year. As I said, my daughter went to the Junior Olympics as well. So sport has always been something that's very important within our family. So they're all there. My son also did gymnastics. Not that he could do it now, but he's also got a friend who is probably going to get the gold medal at gymnastics in the pommel horse. So it's very exciting for me. Don't talk to me next week. I'll be watching a lot of sport.
Lots of yelling.
Yeah, right? Believe me.
So you attended University of Sunderland, which I had never heard of. So I did some.
Nobody does.
So how did, and you were the first in your school, in your family to go to college or the university, I should say. So how did that come about growing up in a very small farm town? How did you even know, like, this is the thing and apply to the school and get in? There's a lot involved in that.
Yeah, look, very honest, and most people who know me will know that I've got a lot of determination, grit, and I am probably, somebody who is very assertive. That's good and bad, and people on the call will certainly tell you that. But I was just adamant that I had to get out of Northern Ireland, and as I said, I had teachers, Miss Patterson, and then I went to a local technical college who just recognised that mathematics and politics, which I'm fascinated with, really were where I was excelling. So they just put the two and two together, and they helped me, and they really did get me a qualification or get me the opportunity to go into economics. I didn't have any money. Just didn't. University is extremely expensive, nowhere near as it is in the USA, but it was. So I was very lucky that I had an interview with the Royal Air Force, and they actually sponsored me to go to university. So they gave me money. I went to the university, from October to May, and then I was in the RAF between May and September of every year. You just had to do that, was the obligation. But again, it learned me a lot of strong work ethic, athleticism, communication skills and drive. So that's the reason why I did it, and that was how I was able to afford it.
So, why economics of all the
Yeah,
options?
yeah, and you know what? I think everybody should have a background in economics, especially, in supply chain or in any industry. Economics really is, the fluctuation of the economy, how it's up and it's down. It's the, employment status. It mimics or aligns to globalization issues. We can't get around it. We just can't. In the same way that, somebody asked me the other day, what is procurement? And I was going, well, we procure and source for ourselves individually every single day. And when we are procuring it, we're looking for the best price. When we're going on holidays, we're looking for the best exchange rate. Well, they're all factors of economics. And I just felt that if I did economics as my initial degree, then that was going to give me an opportunity to get into a good role, a financial role, because I really to be honest, Sarah, I just wanted to make money. And I just thought it was the right role that would sort of give me that overall scope of any job opportunities I could do.
How fitting you're wearing green today. To me, when I see green, I think of the color money.
Money, money.
So interesting. I also majored in economics.
Did
So
you?
when I went to Sonoma State, which is a really small state school in California, kind of like a private school, but you don't have to pay for a private school. School is not my jam. I'm surprised I even went to college, but it was really small classes, much more community focused, which was my vibe. And I had my big influence in my education was Dr. Robert Eiler, and he was my professor my freshman year, economics professor. Loved economics because of him. So I went into my counselor and added a second. So I was a business major. I added a second major, economics, because of him. And I was very fortunate. Most of my econ classes, I got to have him as my professor. It just worked out that as the courses were being built and they were building out the econ program, he was teaching a lot of them that I needed as I was progressing. So,
and do you feel, Sarah, question back to you, do you feel that that's been a great foundation for you in your career, having that sort of knowledge of the Phillips curve and depreciation and all of that?
no, I am not a big fan of traditional school. I wish I had gone to an entrepreneurship focused school
Yeah, me too.
that taught me to build businesses and run companies as a child or younger. So I did not get a ton out of going to college. What I got was learning how to make connections, learning how to network, and learning how to study successful people and implement those things in my life.
For me, I think I had a lot of that as well. But I made some amazing friends who I'm so lucky, are still my friends today. And that's been a real godsend as well, because they know the way that my drive is, and they bring me back down to basics. And I think that's also a learning curve that I would always say to students is, don't just walk away from your student life. Ensure that you're getting those connections, work on those connections all of your life, because they're the people that will drive you to continued success. So yeah, that's probably what I would say is the biggest value that I got out of going to Sunderland.
So I was in a sorority, no surprise to anyone who knows me. I'm an AGD for life. I was president of my pledge class and president of our sorority. And I still to this day host events for my pledge class. I actually brought our group together a couple months ago. So to your point, the connections and networking piece, I think is really what I learned outside of the classroom, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So most important thing you learned in college?
not to drink as much as I did. But then I am Irish. I think for me, the most important thing was it's not a confined space. I think when you go to college, especially when you're a little farm girl like myself, you go with this view that it's going to be bigger, better, all this influences around you. And I actually realized it was still too small for me. And I think the thing that I learned was listening to my friends who were traveling, who had a bit more money than me, was that there was opportunity. There was, the capacity to develop and learn even more if I got out of the UK as well. So the moment I graduated, and I mean the moment, I literally had my graduation ceremony in the morning. The following day, I was supposed to go home to Ireland, and let me tell you, I didn't arrive.
And I forget, what did you tell your parents? What was the story?
So if you remember back then, there wasn't mobile phones. There was those phones that you kept putting the dimes in. I remember ringing my dad a little bit tipsy, and he said, "What time am I picking you up at the airport?" And I said, "You're not." So the next day, I call him again, and I said, "I'm at the airport." And he starts shouting at me, going, "It's going to take me an hour and a half to get to the airport." And I'm like, I think it's going to take you a bit longer. And he goes, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in New York." And he's like, "What?" You can imagine some of the Irish words that came out of his mouth. And he's like, "How much do you have?" And I went, "I don't know, 35 something dollars in my name." And he said, "How are you going to cope?" And I said, "I'll cope." And I stayed for 3.5 years.
So why New York of all places?
Yeah, that was really important, and I think this has been probably the biggest influence in my life, and still makes me quite emotional. Actually, I went to America to do Camp America, but I didn't want to do the norm where it was kids that had opportunities and they could go to these lovely camps. I actually worked with the New York Coalition for the Homeless, and I went to their camp in upstate New York. Um, and some of the stories, like it's not for this conversation, but just some of the things that those children had to go through in their lives. There was one girl I can tell you that was 13 and pregnant to her father, as an example. And I say this even to my kids. You've got to every day wake up and really appreciate what you've been given, because there's so many other people out there that, and I really do mean that just don't have that same opportunity or the ability to have somebody to drive them forward. So it definitely was the most influential period of my life working for them. And if anybody's on the call and wants to work with them, please do. They are probably one of the best organizations I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I can feel myself emotional.
So you arrived with $35
I
and
did.
you found the camp, or that was
No,
pre-planned?
yeah, it was pre-booked. I had already done some research on it. Camp America is a huge organization here in the United Kingdom, giving young 18 to 24-year-olds the opportunity to go to America, work in a camp, etc. So I'd already done that, passed the interviews and everything, and they specifically ask you which camp that you want to go to. And lots of my friends wanted to go to camps where parents of children would give them lots of little tips and bonuses. It just didn't appeal to me. I wanted to give just that little bit back. So I went originally for 7 weeks of the summer. A couple of friends, we bought an old Cadillac for about £200. We started traveling, and I ended up staying. Met a young man. That's a bad mistake. Met a young American and stayed for 3.5 years.
We'll get to the family piece. So you came to New York, you worked at this camp, found your
Yeah,
almost like your life calling or passion, I feel
yeah,
like.
absolutely.
Now, you also have 3 degrees.
Well, I did 2 degrees and 2 masters. Yeah.
So 2 degrees, 2 masters, and a PhD, correct?
Yeah.
So tell me, why so much school? That's a
Hey,
lot of your life to be in school.
Well, and believe me, I'm not in school when I'm doing most of this. It's always been, secondary to employment. But when you are growing up in those environments, Sarah, and you're told at a very young age that this is the route that your life is going to take, and many of my friends at that age went down that route in that direction. I was very much, no, that's not me. That's not who I am. It's not what I want to be. And I just love to learn. I definitely am a sponge. I like to learn from people. I love listening to their stories, what they've done to get to where they're moving forward. I was very interested in some of the subjects that in my MBA, which I did in New Jersey. That was very important again for just having the opportunity to maybe get a visa in the United States. I did it whilst I had two jobs. I had a job with a company called Heller Industries, and I also was a paramedic in Newark. And if anybody knows Newark in New Jersey, being a paramedic there is hard work. So it was really important for me just to make sure that I could move myself forward. My second master's, which is criminology studies, was really because I wanted to understand the mind of a criminal, especially when I was in the police. That was extremely important to me as well, because it also allows you to understand how to approach them, how to talk to them, and recognize, again, as you said, influential, the Coalition of the Homeless, just to recognize that there's reasons why a lot of people commit crimes, what scenarios they're in life or what's happened to them in life. And that's very important to me, is to recognize that, we all don't have the same story. Okay, it's like a poet, which road are you going to go down, the narrow road or the wide road, and I wanted to make sure that I was aware of that. And then my PhD, I just love political science. It's something that I've always driven about, so I did it whilst my children were growing up. And if Kai is still on the call, I'm just going to point one thing out. He has only one degree and one master's. He has a lot of catching up to do.
Ooh, the mom versus son debate
Yeah,
here.
oh, it is in a lot of things, not just education, but we've got a little thing called Bean, which is how many countries each of us have been to, and he's way behind.
Oh, and it's pronounced Kai.
Yeah, it's Kai, and he's currently in Dubai, would you believe? So it's really nice that he stayed up so late to join the call.
Kai, drop us a note if you're still on. We'll see if he's still awake. So you said while you were getting your second degree in crim or master's in criminology, you also working for the police?
Yeah, I was actually a Bobby on the beat. So I'm sure you know what that is, in the Metropolitan Police. With my stick in my hand, so anything you can think of Sherlock Holmes days, that was me. Um, oh, I loved it. It was just brilliant. I made so many good friends, both in the criminal world and in the police world.
So
You wouldn't even.
I don't know what this is. So for me and those on the who are listening live, what is that?
Yeah, so the Metropolitan Police is just like your police
Okay.
service. So I basically, I'll tell you a funny story. The job that I was in, I was doing a presentation one day. They kept saying they were waiting for a Mr. Clifton, which is my maiden name, but they kept saying Mr. And I went, well, actually, it's Miss Clifton. And I just went, I can't deal with this. I really couldn't. I don't like sexism, racism, or anything. Anybody who knows me knows that. So I just went, I don't want to do this anymore. So I applied to the police, and I went to London and was the Bobby on the beat that was running after criminals and arresting people. And it was just brilliant.
So we've April put a note in the comments. She says peelers.
That's it. She knows those words well, but yeah, that's what it was. It was the peeler. So yeah, so I did that for 2 or 3 years. I got an injury. That's another story for another day. That it was sort of a case of my husband was in a war-torn scenario in the army. I was in the police. I got injured, and one of us just had to give.
And then PhD comes next.
PhD came probably about 10 or so years later. Um, Look, my hands were going, I need to learn again. There's something there. Really wasn't enjoying the company that I was working with. Again, quite a male dominated organization in Northern Ireland. And I just went, I'm bored. If I don't do something, I'm going to lose my mind. So I just decided that this is something that I wanted to do. And I love anything to do with politics and economics and globalization and what's happening with the world. So my PhD is in a political science activity looking at economies across different global eras, which actually my son is now doing something similar.
Oh, so mom set the example.
Yeah, yeah. And then my daughter's doing a doctorate, so I'm quite lucky.
So where does family fit into all of this? You met your husband and you barely
Oh,
knew him
oh,
and
he's
got
lovely.
married. And I don't know if he's on the call today.
No, he'll definitely not be on. But yeah, I met him. I met and got engaged in 5 days. Here, as I said, I get itchy feet. I just knew. I came home from America. I met him in a bar, which is not something that either of us would really be doing. He walked out of the bar. My friend told me to follow him home. I'm like, my dad is going to go mad. But anyway, I followed him home. He was sitting on the doorstep, and I said, hope you don't mind me being here. I know he's cringing downstairs listening to this. And he said, nope, because you're going to be here for the rest of your life.
And this was the first night you met.
And we got engaged on the fifth night, and I went back to New Jersey to finish my degree. He came that Christmas to see me, and I walked past him in Newark Airport and didn't even recognize him. But it must have worked.
So who started the conversation in the bar?
uh, this is a funny story. You don't want to hear it. My husband lived in Germany. I lived in New York. He started the story by saying he was wearing something. Do you like this? Because I bought it in Germany, and that's where I live. Being the bullshit 24-year-old that he was at the time. And I went, that's okay. Do you like my watch, my hat, my shirt? And he goes, yeah. And I went, well, they're all from New York because that's where I live. And I walked away because I thought, I don't like this guy. But he was gorgeous. I mean, when I say this, he was gorgeous.
So
And he still is.
So you started it with some sass, and then he came after. He came after.
And he's still coming after Sarah. He's still following me. He's great, and he owns his own business. He's got a lot of drive as well, but he's the best. He is. I'm very, very lucky.
And you've been married, what you said now, 31 years?
Yeah.
And then how did kids come into the mix of all of the work, school, getting married?
Strangely, my husband told me one day that he didn't want to have children. He thought, we didn't need them. We were very happy, very content. We were traveling the world, etc. He went off on a military, event that he had to go on. He was at the top of the mountain. He actually called me up and he says, "Oh, I'm on top of Kilimanjaro." That's where it was at the time. I said, "Well, that's good. I'm pregnant." And he put the phone down. Clear as day. He's like, "What?" No, I have to say, he is like, I cannot tell you, he is everything you would want to have in a dad. He has always been there. He's the one that would wake them up in the morning, or sorry, take them to bed at night. He's the one that reads them books. He's been, and he didn't do education, but he has always been very influential in driving them both for education. He definitely doesn't like swimming because he didn't like the early mornings that we did. But other than that, he's just exceptional, Sarah, and I genuinely mean that. I am one of the most fortunate women, and he knows that I like solo traveling. We'll talk. I'm sure you'll ask me that. I go off traveling a lot by myself, and he never complains. He'll just say to me, "Did you leave enough food in the kitchen?" That's it.
See you when you get back.
Yes, see you later, boy. And I have 2 children. I have Kai, completely laid back. He just loves people. If anybody ever meets him in this call, honestly, he wakes up with a smile on his face. He goes to bed with a smile on his face. He just loves to travel, loves to meet people, loves to smile, gives lots of hugs. My daughter is very like me.
I have to ask, is he single for those on the call that are looking?
No, he's definitely not single. He's got a beautiful young lady. who's actually just arrived in Dubai to share some time with him. So,
okay, he's off market. I'm sure I get some messages about this after, so I'm clearing the air.
and then there's Scarlett. Scarlett, would you believe? I'm looking at the time, is currently somewhere between Doha and Kuala Lumpur. So she is a bit like myself. She is off doing a little bit of traveling in between university. Um, and she is very, very independent, very opinionated. I don't know who she takes that after at all. Very assertive. You never have to ask that wee girl to do anything. She has got so much drive and she is stunning. Like she is one of the most beautiful young ladies I've ever met, inside and out.
And is she single?
No.
Okay. No dating here today. We'll
No.
just
No.
throw that out there. Both are taken.
Yeah, both are.
So I guess we should talk about career stuff too, right? This is a procurement supply chain show. So amongst family working in the police, military, education, you, I guess it's fair to say, fell into, right, kind of being in this industry. So talk to me about how you got started in the procurement space.
So I think, for anybody, if you think of what procurement is, especially in today's business, I probably was always in procurement. It wasn't a formalized description, whether that's being in the police at the end of the day, I'm procuring criminals, need to know where to source the criminal, where I'm getting the information from. And then when I went into, working in the implementation stage of my life, you're still you're procuring dates from your development and implementation dates. You're trying to put strategies in place about how successfully you can implement it without risk and ensuring that, you've got a good ROI. So I think I've always been involved in that area, formalizing it more because I love people. I think most people know that. And I love building relationships. I think it's the most important attribute that anybody within, ISM or procurement, this industry have. In fact, I think it's the most important attribute in any job that anybody should have. But those influences then have really, demonstrated that opportunity to work in more of a technology procurement and consulting perspective. But I think it's always been there, even from sourcing a potato. It's just always been something that I've had a real interest in.
I think of sourcing your season ticket.
Exactly. Using my Irish charm, Sarah, all the way along.
So you started at a company which I was not familiar with, called SHS Group, and you were there a long time, like over 10 years, which in my world, being a millennial, is a long time to be at a company. And then you left to join a company called Chainyard, which develops block change solutions.
Chainyard and TYS are the same company. It's the parent company.
Okay, so that's a good fact to know. So why did you leave your role at SHS to join Trust Your Supplier?
So I think I'll go back one step. Before that, I worked for Nortel Networks. By the way, if anybody knows Dupre, I met his father who worked there. That's how we've got that connection. So I worked there, would you believe, for a gentleman called Gary Store, who is, again, one of those people that has influenced my life and my career. He now works, would you believe, at TYS. So we worked at Nortel. Nortel unfortunately went under, but probably is and was the best place I've ever worked in my life. It was just fantastic. But back then, most people, especially where I lived, you got a job and that was tended to be the job that you would stay in for the rest of your life. Most people in Nortel were there 40, 50 years. But unfortunately, the company went bust. I worked then for SHS, part of an FMCG organization, a great company. It was very good for me for when I was having children. They were very good and supportive, have given me, the opportunity to take them to swimming galas and come in late. also give a little bit of training, some really influential people in there. One of them in particular that would be great for you to have a chat with. But it was a very male-dominated organization. There's no doubt about that. There was no females at that early stage anywhere in that C-suite. Gary came along.
And you were in I think on LinkedIn you call it a PMO role, but is that kind of like a project management role?
Yeah, it manages more than one project at a time. So, and mostly in SAP. So my background from Nortel and from SHS was SAP integrations, master data governance, API orchestration, middleware. So that's where a lot of that foundational information that I've needed to support the role in TYS has happened. But Gary came along and literally said to me, I have a role which happened just at the perfect time for where I was in my career and the age of my children. And he said, it is a new start. There is a risk. There's always a risk with new starts. And I went, yeah, let's go. So I literally moved.
So going back into startup mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely is a startup mode.
So what do you let's I don't know if everyone who's with us knows what TYS is. So company is Trust Your Supplier, goes by TYS for short.
Yeah.
What problem because I would describe you as being in somewhat of a crowded space.
Yep.
Supplier information world. What problem are you solving for companies?
Yeah, so I think you're right about that crowded space. There's no doubt about it. And there are some fantastic organizations that are out there. And the reason why that crowded space is there, if I think about it right now, is, everybody wants to be aware of transparency of information and the speed and execution of delivering that information. Technology advancements. If it had been 3 years ago, everybody was talking about blockchain. If it was, a year ago, everybody's talking about AI, and now everybody's talking about IoT. And it'll change, with globalization. We're in, what are we, phase 5 of the world of globalization. I'm sure there's a phase 6 coming along quite quickly. And then everybody wants to know about risk. And risk has been extremely volatile over the past few years, because people are now aware of things like sustainability, making sure that we've got human rights and anti-slavery laws, and a lot of things that I don't think industries really reflected on too much, 5+ years ago before. So industry has changed. The speed of that information is extremely important to them, and the monitoring and keeping that information is going. But if I think of I always think of my passport. My daughter, as I said, has had to get 2 different visas for where she is going, and that's great. It's the same information that I put into her Bali visa that I also put into her Sri Lanka visa. I don't understand why we have to do it twice, okay? And that's really what Trust Your Supplier are trying to do. We want to work with all of these wonderful partners and these integrated providers. We want to provide that multidimensional overview of risk compliance as quickly as it appears. I'd love to have done a cybersecurity check on CrowdShare on Thursday. I think we would all have addressed some real influential information that might have impacted some of the areas of concern on Friday. We want to make sure that you've got a digital wallet that's giving you that can be shared. That supplier can share it with all of their buyers at the same time, rather than that, continuous adoption into different platforms, different engagements. They're working in master data information, so working in front-end supplier onboarding, they're then inputting into risk management solutions. If you have one solution that has that multi-dimensional overview of your supplier, well, then I'm going to hand you your passport back. And that passport with that visa to say your cybersecurity, your ESG score, your master data, your standards and compliance, etc., can be handed to a multitude of buyers. That if it's updated in a sanction text space and I can't travel to Sri Lanka, well, then everybody's going to get to know it at the same time. So I think that everybody has got a part to play in these industries, and there are some, as I said, great organizations that are out there. But I think that, coopetition, that ability to work together, which we're doing with our strategic partners, will deliver the opportunity to have that single source that everybody talks about. I don't necessarily think it's a truth, because truth is only for today. It's not for tomorrow, because continuous monitoring will change the truth every single day. And that's what it is that we want to try and deliver. And I'm really lucky that we've got some influential strategic partners that are helping us to do that.
So is it fair? I like analogies to make things easy to understand.
Yeah.
So is it, oh, I don't know if that's me with the background noise. Is it fair to liken a digital wallet to a passport? So if I have a passport and it has all my information, I can go distribute it without having to repeat myself or re-enter information over and over again.
Yeah, and I think it goes a couple of steps further than that. So I was doing some online tutoring to somebody the other day, and they were saying to explain it to me. What does that really mean? And you've got to try and explain it in a way that somebody's going to understand in today's technology. So I used Instagram, right? So let's use Instagram as an example for that. And I'm sure a lot of us have got Instagram groups where we have your family or anybody that are all part of that feed. And when we post pictures into that, we all need the agreement that we're happy to post that picture. It's got this trigger that basically says, here's when the pictures were actually recorded. If anybody deletes, everybody's aware of the deletion. If anybody updates or changes, they're all made aware of the information. So if I think of blockchain and what TYS are trying to do, it's basically that Instagram group where every post is a block. That's a piece of information. It's added in order. It's immutable. You can see the information, the changes that happen every time. But the feed that it's given to that group of people that's within that is the blockchain. They're seeing the same information, the same changes all together at the same time, but they still have the ability to go in and look at the audit trail behind that. So I think that's a really good way of trying to express it. All of us like to get information. We all have WhatsApp groups. We all want to know when things are happening, and that to me is what we're trying to do with the blockchain and the digital wallet.
Very fascinating to me, this whole digital wallet concept, because I've not seen many suppliers in or procure tech firms in our space doing this or leaning into this model yet. So it'll be interesting to see how it takes off, right? You need a couple forward-thinking companies to adopt, test it, and kind of make it a thing, some early adopters, right? Before your other firms will start to kind of pick it up and it becomes a thing.
Well, can I give you an example? Before we go, I'll give you an example of that. So we do have I'm going to give you one large example of a company that has 88 ERP systems, 88 different sources of information.
That I don't even believe it, because that kind of blows my mind.
Exactly.
That's possible.
And by the way, we know lots of other companies that have actually got over 2,000, a very large drink with a red and white stripe. But for them, they need a digital wallet that each of those 88 ERP systems are getting information about really quickly. So even if it's not to customers, so even if it's to ERPs, the blockchain and that digital wallet is ensuring that both of those ERPs are getting that same influential information, that up-to-date, continuously monitored risk data right away. They don't have to go into their other applications, their ERPs. They are all seamlessly getting one set of information. So I don't necessarily think it's even buyers or customers that we need to have looking at this. It's even solutions that we're working in today. All of those different data fields or data lakes of information. It's how that digital wallet can support that as well.
Yeah, it's almost like the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Michelle, you're kind of a unicorn, and you have a title that involves something called value solutions.
Yeah.
And For those that are listening that may be thinking, well, what does someone like Michelle actually do in Procure Tech, right? You work for Trust Your Supplier. Can you explain to folks what Value Solutions is and why it's important in an organization?
Yeah, but I think some people might call it solutions architect, value engineering, etc. But in our company, it's definitely the role that bridges the gap between technical capabilities and customer needs. It's where I'm working very closely with our chief revenue officer and his sales team, really to not only understand the customer requirements, but really develop tailored solutions, understanding and demonstrating how our solution, product, or service can support them. But it takes a little bit further as well, because not only you're doing those needs assessments and preparing and all those presentations, etc., but an awful lot of the industry today are not just looking at what the technology can do, because they're like, whose technology? You've just said it. It's a space that is saturated with different different organizations. We're trying to take that slightly further along the line, where we're going, what else is impacting you? Compliance, regulations. Do you know what compliance and regulations are really impacting you? One of the other big things that I think is really important is it's not just about getting a third party. So lots of people say, I've got somebody for ESG and cyber. What are you doing with the information? So what we try to do is then help them to orchestrate, using approvals and workflow management of getting the information, and then equipping their team to actually manage that from a spend analytics, from an ROI, from a risk perspective, who needs to know the information. And I think for my role, it's now not only driving information internally to our organizations from the business, but it's actually helping the business influence their compliance teams, their procurement teams, their financial teams, their logistics teams, because today, there's no doubt about it, procurement is not procurement anymore. It is sourcing, delivering, understanding compliance, understanding risk, understanding ROI, understanding technology and how it's going to impact you. And it's a much wider role than it ever was before. And I think it's just going to expand further. And all I'm trying to do is to let them have those conversations with me, understand how our application can address them. And in some cases, Sarah, probably give away too much professional service and go, here's another solution that might be able to do it for you, or here's something that you need to be considering as well in your strategic plan.
So in my marketing brain, I think about what you said as you're a combination of a project manager and a translator.
And I would say customer services as well, because I think you can't get away with that.
But you're taking what everyone's saying and interpreting and translating and then solving the problem.
Yeah, and providing some additional professional services that may not be necessarily directly related to the application. But in my view, how you build your relationships, which we talked about at the very beginning, is how you retain your customers. It's not just getting them deployed and implemented. It's making sure, and my chief revenue officer is, very big on that, and customer services, and making sure that we're deriving, we're getting that derivative and saying it doesn't finish at implementation. We're constantly working with them, working with verticals. We have meetings with our buyers that talk about new compliance regulations so that they are truly part of the network. And I think that feedback loop is what really sets us apart. It's working with the strategic partners, the buyers, the suppliers, and also with some of these other organizations like the European government that I work with, that really provides the structure and influence about where they need to go forward with.
So we have reached what I call my Spitfire round. This is where I'm going to ask you
be nice.
A few questions, and you respond with the first word or phrase that comes to mind.
Ooh.
Accomplishment you are most proud of.
My children.
Quality you admire most in yourself.
Determination.
What are you binging?
The next flight that I'm booking. Not TV. It's always where's the next flight to?
I'll throw in the Olympics for you, since that's your binge next week.
Yeah, it will be.
What's your dream?
To have one more chat with my dad who passed away last year.
Favorite thing to do in your downtime?
Travel, absolutely.
And bucket list item you plan to check off this year?
I am going to India to do the Dalai Lama walk completely solo for 2 weeks. I can't wait.
With that, we are signing off for today. Catherine McCleary will be back next month with another really special guest who started her career in procurement and supply chain, pivoted into IT, and is now a chief information officer. If you are not already connected with Michelle, highly recommend reaching out to her on LinkedIn. She is a wealth of information and just a really fun and cool person. With that, wishing everyone a wonderful afternoon.
And good luck with your new career, Sarah. Thanks very much.